Well, hello and welcome to Association Transformation, the newly nominated for a whole separate set of awards international podcast. How do you like that?
That's us. I love how you.
That's us, right? I mean,
different award.
We want to thank MEMCOM. We want to thank MEMCOM for the nomination. We're very excited to be considered. I know those awards are still a few weeks off here, but very excited that our little DIY podcast has gone so big and gets to advance such important conversations. So Andrew Chamberlain, Elevated.
Hello.
Elisa Pratt, Brewer Pratt Solutions. We're glad to be back with you and thank you for all the love and support around the world from all of our, I don't know, I'd say now 50 listeners? I mean, come on.
All right, don't let
all we 75?
Don't let all this success go to your head, right? I think double figures. Let's just be comfortable. Let's just be happy with double figures.
Well, let's just say it's more than our parents. It's more than our parents and our huge listeners in Belgium. Okay.
Yeah. All right, I hear you.
And it may be the most appropriate. We have a very special guest, longtime listener, maybe one of our founding fans, longtime listener, first-time guest, Chris Selzig, the Chief Executive Director, Chief Staff Executive from the Entomological Society of America is here with us today. Yay, very exciting.
Thank you for
Chris,
having me.
welcome. Thanks for being here.
I'm delighted, thank you.
I think it's fabulous that we actually invited our listener to join us. That
Don't speak of him in the singular. Don't do that.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you've listened to the podcast and then you want to come on, which I think.
Okay, that too, that in itself may be the victory. Yes, that you didn't scare all of our listeners away.
Nope, no, I find your banter endearing.
Oh, see, such a diplomat. And actually, that's a perfect, I think, framing of today's conversation because. It's a prickly world. It's a difficult world. There are more perspectives and more divergent thoughts and approaches to a variety of issues, both those within the association space and external to the association space, political, economic, societal, and I think the cultural storm that has demonstrated itself and that we've all been a part of to different extents over the last 2 to 3 years impact us, not just the families that we're in, the communities that we live in, but the associations that we are members of and our staff within. And it's important for us to address a membership association's role and responsibility in this modern world. So I'm excited to have Chris here today. ESA, the Entomological Society, has really found, I think, a very powerful voice in some of these modern conversations. And we've invited Chris with us today to discuss, what, when, and how a membership organization should engage on topics of broad social interest, especially when they're not black and white. They're not easy. They're not safe conversations to always be having. So, Chris, you have been with ESA for a really long time. Well, I don't mean to make it sound like that, like you're so
insulting. That was so
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I meant in like an experienced, long tenured,
stop. You're just digging yourself in deeper.
No,
stop.
So here's the thing though, Andrew. Both of those are true.
You're letting her off.
No, well, we've been friends for a long time. So I started 22 years ago, but I've only been the executive director for the past couple of years. Really, the duration of the pandemic is about where it started.
Yeah, lucky you. Wasn't fully aware of what you were signing up for, but I'd like to think the right guy at the right time. And an important opportunity in this organization has really, as I said, found a voice. But in the last, let's just say 6 months, between wars and historic inflation and mass shootings and Supreme Court decisions, there have been a variety of difficult news headlines that impact our membership and in many ways impact the scientific community that you lead, that your members are a part of. How do you go about deciding when it's appropriate to make a statement or to extend yourself into those discussions?
Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is actually to just take a step back first and just talk about scientific societies sort of historically and writ large. And I don't think we're a ton different than a lot of other associations that were founded in the 1800s, or had their at least origins back, along that code, where we got pretty used to going along the same set of roads and paths that we just always trod. And that generally meant stay in your lane. Do not get into topics that are somewhat controversial or maybe more social and broad societal in nature. And it really wasn't until about a decade ago that we kind of got serious on any kind of advocacy. And that was when one of our longtime members assumed a pretty high leadership post within the USDA. And he kind of read us the Riot Act, and rightly so, and said, where is ESA? You're not at the table. And our board at that time kind of woke up to the idea that, yeah, okay, the old adage in politics is, if you're not at the table, you're what's being eaten. And so that's what we really sort of woke up to the fact that we had to have a presence. So we started there, and we started with position statements on topics of broad interest to our science, and we developed a process by which we would consider broad topics. We call it our tiered agenda, where we have a way to review scientific topics. Some of them are broader than others, and one of them is scientific integrity, and that's one of our most important topic areas, and you can file an awful lot under that. And so that was a long-winded answer of getting to your question directly, where if something falls directly into scientific integrity or one of the other issues that are on our tiered agenda, then we'll probably make a statement on it. And that also opened the door to allow our leadership to be a little bit more open to the idea of considering topics that are of broad societal interest, even if they don't directly tie to our science. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know you and I have known each other for a while, and you helped me understand some of the scientific names of insects that were being influenced and changed and considered over the recent years because of some new social and cultural discussions. And maybe those were some of the easiest conversations for you and your organization to take a stand on and to find your voice within. I know the spongy moth is the new name of an insect that was recently renamed as part of this discussion. Did that experience help you fine tune this tiered agenda and figure out what your new lane was?
Actually, I would say no. I think we'd already kind of found our voice by that time, and it kind of stiffened the backbone, or I suppose exoskeleton in our world. But
that was a bug joke, Andrew. You're allowed to laugh. That's a bug joke.
I figured it was. Yeah.
It really was it's actually probably the George Floyd era that really allowed us to start to figure out how we can speak out when we should speak out. And when I say how, what I mean is it a societal response, or is it a response from leadership? Because we do both.
So when you say that you do both, is that basically who signs the letter?
That's exactly
Is
right.
that what you're actually saying, kind of the tense that you use, or who the statement's coming from?
Yeah, a couple, both really. And a good example, Andrew, I suppose this news resonated across the pond as well, but the Supreme Court recently has come down with a couple of decisions that have been controversial. And we currently have four strong women in our presidential line as past president, vice president-elect. And when the decision about overturning Roe v. Wade came down, the four of them, even though they don't agree monolithically about every aspect of this, they came up with a statement supporting women broadly. Now, that is something that we as a society, of course, also believe in, but because it doesn't directly tie to entomology, that was a statement that came out from the presidents themselves. And we workshopped that to make sure that it was something that everybody agreed with. And the statement clearly says, we recognize that this is not a topic that all members or all people really will agree with, but we feel that it's important to speak out in support of women, sort of broadly, and advocating for women's rights.
Well, and I love how you stepped back from the minutia of the issue, and I don't mean minutia in a dismissive way, but the details of the issue, and you stepped back to supporting women and women's pursuit of science.
Exactly.
Through access to healthcare, and only through a safe and equitable experience can women then proceed to be a contributing part of science. So you wove it back in to your lane. No, not directly to entomology, but that would have been a bit of a stretch. But this was about supporting women's pursuit of science and empowering women through science. So I like, you didn't, it's a one paragraph statement. It was to the point, it was powerful. And you're right, it was signed by your 4 elected female volunteer leaders, which is, I know, historic for you all. And maybe, maybe the right leaders at the right time for this type of issue. And you've done that very artfully in several of these communications. Not only, you mentioned George Floyd, why Black Lives Matter to entomology. When addressing the January 6th insurrection, you guys released a statement, Our Place in Democracy. You're never really inserting yourself in an inappropriate way. You're taking the step back to look at the larger issue, and where science, entomology, and your community can have a positive influence in the discussion.
Yeah, I think it's just a different lens through which we view the world than perhaps we have always done. Well, 2 things. First off, a lot of these statements are workshopped very quickly internally, both by staff, and we're blessed to have some really outstanding communications and marketing folks on the team. Really, top to bottom, the ESA has got a great team. So that's been helpful that we're able to work together with that. And then we also, either through SharePoint or Google Docs or something, workshop it with whomever is going to actually be signing it as well. But yeah, you're right. We always try to tie it back to the science, because that's the lens that we look at things now through. We put out a statement when Russia attacked Ukraine, just to talk about the fact that one of the probably unseen consequences of this new war is the destruction of natural history collections at the museums in Kyiv and Lviv and other cities throughout Ukraine. And as those bombings take place, sometimes irreplaceable collections are going up in flames. And so what will happen when the war finally does come to an end is that the scientific community, and specifically the entomological community, is going to need to pull together and find, are there specimens which can be given or loaned to the Ukrainian scientists to start to rebuild some of this somewhat lost science.
Have you had any fallout? You're making, quite rightly, in my opinion, you're making, strong statements in support of, or against, depending on what the subject is and the issue is. Have you had fallout?
Yeah, for sure. We definitely have. And, Elisa mentioned the spongy moth as an example. And that's a name that replaced an insect that used to have an ethnic slur into it. And there were some kind of hateful messages that came in, a couple that we even reported to the FBI, just as
oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
people get passionate about their moths.
They do. People get passionate about anything. I'm sorry. Have you been on Twitter? Yeah.
That's true. Sorry,
yeah.
Andrew's only on TikTok. If you haven't heard, he's a TikTok star. So
TikTok generation is what you mean.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's added himself to the TikTok generation, whether they want him or not.
I believe you said that I self-identify as a TikToker, which I'm totally fine with. Actually, I'm cool with that.
That's
all right. Fair. Back to the moths.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So, we definitely get some pushback. and both from the general public and also from the membership. And I don't want to paint it with too broad of a brush, but it often falls along generational lines, where we know that the future of the discipline is a little more supportive of speaking up for issues that I guess you might call a little bit more progressive, support and inclusive. Certainly talking about DEI. And again, I don't want to. I'm not trying to pigeonhole old versus young and anything like that. But it's just broad camps. That tends to be how things tend generally fall. Said a different way, we know where the future of the science is, and that's where we're trying to go. And so we're trying to support the beliefs and the passions of those who are going to be the leaders of our society, both ESA and globally in the years to come. So yeah, we get a little bit of pushback, but we put our big boy pants on and deal with it.
When you say pushback, what do you mean? Is it just like some emails from members disgruntled, or are you getting resignations from the membership? I mean, how extreme is it? How both?
Yeah, we get both. Yeah, we've had a couple of folks that say, look, ESA's just gotten too activist for me, and I'm moving on. And okay, that's fine. God bless. It's a big world, and we know that we can't please everybody.
Yeah.
What we wanted. And some of this comes to, the leaders that we have at this time, and we know that they are passionate believers in equity and inclusion, plus some of the other related topics that we're speaking out about. And it also aligns with my personal view. And I know I took this job and I kept this job because I believe in making a difference in the world, and I believe strongly in the fact that insect science has a way to make the world better, whether that be from supportive indicator species of climate change. Like entomologists can't fix climate change, but we can tell you when you've got a problem, because we've got indicator species that start to grow or decline based on climate change. We work hard on vector-borne disease like Zika and some of the other issues that are transmitted by mosquitoes. And the feeding of the world is inextricably tied to entomology. And so the more that I can support our members doing good in the world, that's what I want to do. And speaking out for the science is kind of how we get there.
And I think it's incredibly important that you've identified that, quite rightly, you're part of the systems of solutions. You won't be able to tackle the climate emergency on your own, but you can absolutely, as an organization, advocate, articulate, define the narrative, lead the science debate around aspects of it, because someone's got to. And I think one of the headaches I always have with associations, membership bodies, learning societies, etc., is there seems to be this hesitancy to sort of engage in these global debates, because I think people see it as if you can't do everything, then you can't do anything. And actually, I would much rather see an association, a membership entity do what you've done, which is to sort of really focus on where the areas that you can have the biggest impact, identify the explicit links, but also I think at the end of the day, membership organizations, they're just about people, and all of these issues are about people. And to say that none of these issues are relevant to an organization is, I think, it is misleading, because actually I'm very pleased that that your organization has taken the lead on ostensibly issues that from the uninformed eye you'd be looking at and thinking, well, why on earth are they talking about, for example, the war in Ukraine? But then of course you've articulated it and explained it, and it's like, well, of course they are. In fact, why wouldn't they be talking about the war in Ukraine? And I wonder, because the sad reality is that at the moment, as an organization, yours is a beacon of not just an exemplar of commitment, social commitment. It's a beacon of social commitment at the moment, because I don't think enough organizations are yet doing what your organization is doing and what you and your leadership team are doing. And I think that for me is the real piece, where the real catalyst, if you like, which is, you've highlighted the 4 people who are in the senior leadership roles at the board level, yourself, your personal commitment. Do you think, you're enacting significant culture change within the leadership of the organization? But do you think, well, or are you rather? Because I mean,
Well,
maybe
I
you're
don't.
already building on something, but
Yeah, I think I might knock that back a peg. Like, I don't want this to be that Chris Delzik has, made ESA into some sort of activist organization, or broadly supportive of some of these other topics. I think I'm supporting our leaders that are interested in speaking out on these topics. And this is a train that was already running by the time I put on my engineer's cap.
Yeah, but if you hadn't then jumped, to use the, continue with the metaphor, if you hadn't jumped on the train, it probably, and fueled the fire, then it might have just come to a ground halt.
Fair enough. All right,
So
this metaphor works well, doesn't it?
Don't detract. My guess, what I'm saying is, don't detract from the impact that you are having. Don't detract from that. I think, for me, it's like, what do you do now to ensure that when you have that transition of leadership, because you will, people will, new members of the board come in, new people will come in as presidents and presidents elect, and these very well could be people who have some significant, who have maybe even expressed some significant disagreement with positions the organization has taken, irrespective of how you've put caveats around those statements. How do you then maintain the culture?
Well, I'd say excellent question. And I guess I would start by, we're basically following the data like any good scientific organization should. Harvard Business Review has done some studies that, majorities of both employees and customers expect CEOs to speak out on topics of controversial, often political or social issues. And so we are doing what people ask us to do. So that's the first thing. And second is we seek to maintain some consistency in our leadership by creating opportunities for engagement among the leaders. Earlier this spring, I went on a presidential retreat with our 4 presidents, where we talked about, how do we tie the threads between 2020, 2021, 2022, 24 moving forward. And we'll do that every 3 to 4 years. And that's a tradition that we've had for a number of years now, where periodically we get the presidents together to make sure that we're focusing on issues that build rather than take us in wildly divergent paths. And that's an example of it. And the board, of course, also does this together as a body. And they talk about topics regularly, just to, we test it for alignment and just to make sure that everybody's in, if not full agreement, at least we can talk about where do we have consensus and where do we find alignment and pull those pieces
So
together.
to that point, you've mentioned workshopping some of the draft letters and these conversations. If in the future, I mean, you're setting a precedent here of responsiveness, and that future generation of entomologists, those early career professionals, are going to come to expect a level of proactive voice and a proactive communication around some of these issues that are larger than ESA. When you do get to a point, and there is going to be that day that comes where you workshop something and it is so sensitive, it is so divisive, what do you do if there isn't accord, there isn't consensus? Will you simply take a pass on an issue until it can play itself out within your community? What would that look like?
So there's a couple different ways we might do that. And, with whatever the issue might be, and whether we do this explicitly or sort of intrinsically, we do consider what is the issue and how does it align with our corporate values as the Entomological Society. Second, can we meaningfully change what's happened here or what might happen? Is there an opportunity to really have an impact? And third, will our constituents agree with this, with what we're saying? And if we can get alignment on all 3 of those, and all 3 of those are yes, then we'll probably be a little more forceful and we might lead. And if there are issues that we feel that's probably right to speak out on, but maybe we're not hitting all three of those different pieces, then we might take a back seat. And there, we are active members of a number of different consortia in the scientific community. And if someone else might be writing a letter on a topic XYZ, we would be supportive. We might sign on to that letter, or we might help amplify it on social media, but maybe we would not be the standard bearers ourselves. So
right. Not the point of the spear on
yeah. There's a lot of different ways to sort of to get there. It really but if it's entomology directly related, we generally will try and be, if not out in front, certainly in the vanguard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I have been very impressed by the not positions necessarily, because it's not about the position. It's about taking the opportunity to advance the conversation and to elevate those external circumstances to and bring them within the scientific conversation. So I've been very impressed. I'm sure it's not easy. I'm sure it's led to an even more difficult first few years on the job than even COVID was. So I'm not sure what you've gotten yourself into here in terms of this precedent that you've set, but it will keep things interesting over at ESA for sure. I'm Andrew, any last questions? I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good. I've enjoyed listening to it. I mean, the reality is I'm going to reach out to Chris after this recording, because I think there's a huge amount that you're doing that I want to kind of learn more about, actually, because I think so much of your good practice I want to share with clients.
Well, let me ask you if I can take the reins for a second. I'm not that familiar with how some of the associations are on your side of the ocean are dealing with some of these social topics, and I know that the topics are just as resonant there as they are here. What are you seeing? What are folks doing, maybe organizationally?
I think you generally see a reluctance to engage because there is an inherent fear of offending the membership and of having an unfortunate backlash. But I would argue that leadership that is of that opinion is actually behind the curve. I think membership is ahead of the curve and is far more sophisticated in their thinking and their ideation around these issues than I think we give them credit for. I think what we're particularly on this side of the pond, I think we're not particularly good at consulting, or to use your phrase, workshopping ideas into something, into a meaningful position, and we tend to shy away from those perceived controversial issues because, like I say, this perception that it's somehow not our responsibility. But I mean, certainly I've spent a lot of time, and this is why I'm going to reach out to you after this, is spend a lot of time talking about, the inherent, membership organizations are inherently socially focused, irrespective of the subject matter, the profession, the industry in which their members work. They exist to enhance an aspect of society. How they do that varies. To what degree of success always varies, but fundamentally they're a core part of civic society. And so I'm working, extensively with organizations to say, look, you can take a lead. You can take a lead, and you can do it without fear of either reprisal or significant loss, which is why I asked you about what's the kind of fallout been, or the ramifications, because I think often as well you get that vocal member who has a strong opinion, who invariably, when we're sitting in our in our glorious isolation, if you like, in our echo chambers around board tables, we perceive that as being the membership's voice, and that feeds this fear that we should be doing something. And so, again, getting, after this recording, I'd love to reach out so that we can share with our listeners down the line what, the kind of practicalities of what that looks like, that workshop in piece, and giving people assurance that they can do this. Because actually, I only saw in the UK, I saw fewer than a handful of membership organizations that took a position on Roe versus Wade. And those who did were the ones you would expect to. They're working in the scientific field, the medical or clinical areas. You would expect them to take a position. But actually, I would argue that, as you did, you can pretty much, make the link without it being spurious. You can absolutely, make these social issues relevant to the work that we're doing as socially focused organizations. So, yeah, I'd love to take this offline and then come back to the listeners down the line, because I think there's some good work we could potentially do together.
Yeah, and Andrew used the word fear. And I think that there are organizations who may not appreciate that they do have the right leaders at the right time.
Indeed.
And if you're an organization that is ready to find your voice and to position yourself as a more socially responsible organization, and address some broader issues of social interest, I think there are some I don't want to call them easy, but some points of entry into conversation that you can tackle. And I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, workshop, draft, get started on a position for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And I think that, to me, is the lowest of all hanging fruit. If you haven't already gotten around to addressing that, to taking a stand there, to demonstrating your commitment in that area. I also think of, ESG, just corporate governance, just, responsibility, transparency, the ethics of how you do what you do. And maybe thirdly, another element of low hanging fruit is climate change. If you haven't addressed these topics, I think those are probably the most widely addressed across all swaths of membership organizations. And if you want to flex and see how you as an organization may react and how your leadership may react, these may be 3 areas of experimentation. But I think you can go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say in support of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. But I think in support of that, I think one of the things that Chris has highlighted is that the leadership in the organization clearly feels that it is empowered to lead. And often, around the board environment, we have a situation where people don't necessarily recognize that they have the delegated authority of the membership and are empowered. And sometimes I think that holds a number of organizations back, because there is this uncertainty around, well, how far am I actually allowed to push the envelope? But I'm thinking that they're empowered, Chris. But you tell me that maybe they've just gone AWOL and they've gone rogue, and you can't pull them back.
I don't want to make it sound like we're out there trying to pick fights, because what we really are doing is how does this interact with our science, with the reason that we exist through our articles of incorporation and our bylaws. And so we really do tie everything back to the science. So that's the first thing. And the second is we do seek out issues that will more broadly unite rather than divide. And if there's something that pesticides is a pretty good example for us. We've got members probably 50-50 on both sides of the pesticides management and pest management debate. So we're probably not going to put out a statement on that, because that would probably split the society. But broadly speaking, what we really try to do is find where our voice is through conversation with members. And we have an awful lot of opportunities to get member feedback on whatever different topics are being discussed in the day, and we build our response out of those areas. And you're absolutely right on the lowest hanging fruit is climate change, DEI, and some of these other topics that there is broad agreement on. The research is clear on climate change. The research is clear that a more inclusive and equitable and diverse organization is going to make better decisions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Chris, thank you so much for what you're doing, for what your leadership is doing. We're going to go ahead and include links to some of your organization's recent statements in the show notes. Not every organization may be ready to be ESA, but I would love to see more nonprofit organizations, more member-driven organizations take this type of example, irrespective of what your position is.
No, I agree. And let's make sure we put a big caveat. Chris is not picking a fight with anyone.
No, and these aren't Chris's positions. That's not the point. This isn't Chris. These aren't Chris's positions.
Right.
These aren't fights.
That's
the
not.
point.
They're not.
These aren't fights.
Absolutely. That's the last thing we want. We want dialogue.
And really, like this will. I'm a caretaker. This is a membership organization that is led by members. And these are never going to be my words. They're always going to come from the society and from the volunteer leadership. And again, it's having an excellent communications team, whether that be members or staff, is really essential to make sure that you get the right tone with whatever statement you put out.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris, so much. Sadly, I think given the chaos in the world, I don't think the need for these type of discussions and positions are going to go away. But thank you for what you're doing. Thank you to your leadership for taking a stand and having a position and tying it back to what you do, tying it back to your area of relevance and your mission. We're excited to have you. We're excited to have you as a longtime listener. Thank you for joining us today. And we encourage anyone out there who wants to discuss opportunities for leadership to find their voice, and any other topic you'd like us to tackle here at Association Transformation. You can reach out on social media. You can email me at elisa@brewerprattsolutions.com. And we look forward to pushing the envelope and having some of those hard discussions here about what the charge of nonprofit and member-driven organizations truly are in this new world, in this area of social interest that affects all of us, whether it's in our mission statement or in our name or not. So thank you again. You can find Association Transformation wherever you get your best podcasts. Make us one of your favorites. Andrew, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for doing this with me now for 2+ years.
2+ years, two awards, 2 years, 2 awards.
I know. I mean, it's uphill from here.
Yeah.
And Chris, one of our founding fans, we get to have him with us. This is great. It's like coming full circle.
It's like the whole family's back together again.
That's right. Thanksgiving dinner. Thank you both for the opportunity.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day. And to everyone listening, put your members and your mission first. Hey!